Ward, Connecticut, 06492.
In which war did you serve?
World War II.
What was your branch of service?
Army Air Force.
What was your highest rank?
Staff Sergeant.
And what general location did you serve?
England.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I drafted.
And where were you living at the time when you were drafted?
In Wallingford.
Were you going to school or?
No, I had just graduated from school, and I lived. I'll give you the address if you want. No.
Do you recall the date which you were drafted?
I entered the service, I think, was March 13th, 1943.
So tell me about the first days of your service, going to basic training or?
We went to Massachusetts, at Fort Devens, Massachusetts. That's where we first went. And from Denver, Massachusetts, we went to my basic training to South Carolina.
Tell me about basic training.
Well, I took training with the foot troops, and also we also went with the artillery.
Do you remember any of your instructors?
No, I don't.
How was the experience in boot camp compared to being in school?
Being 18 years old, and quite exciting.
After boot camp, where did you end up?
After boot camp, as I mentioned before, I went through rudiments of getting transferred out of boot camp, and I made aviation cadet examination, and I was at boot camp. I was allowed to wait and so I could get into the Air Force, Army Air Force.
So tell me about the process of transferring from the regular Army to the Army Air Corps.
Well, the only way I could have been transferred is to take the examinations. And I passed the examination for cadet. And I was supposed to go into the Army Air Force. But when I got into the Army Air Force, at that point in time, they didn't need any flyers after 2 months of training in Florida under the cadet group. They didn't need any more flyers, so they washed everybody out and they were reassigned. And at that point in time, I didn't know exactly what transpired, but I asked what I was qualified for, and the instructor said that I was qualified for most anything. So I was a little ticked that I didn't make the cadets, so I said, what takes the longest training? And they said radio operator. So that's how I became a radio operator in the Army Air Force.
And after your transfer, where did you end up?
After the transfer, I ended up in from sunny Miami to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And that was in December. And it was a kick in the rear, really.
Tell me about it.
Well, the radio operating instruction that we had was about a 3-month period of time. And in between the radio operating period of training, we also went to Arizona to have gunnery training too. And then from there, our training was all over, and that's how we transferred into. We were assigned to a group. So we met our crew in Massachusetts, and from there on, I was in the Army Air Force.
And what unit were you assigned to?
Actually, when we had our crew, we were assigned right to this. Um, uh, what is it? Yeah, we were assigned to the carpetbaggers in Harrington Field in England, which is about an hour away from. You know,
So tell me about leaving the United States. Was that your first time?
well, for that extended period of time, yes,
And how was Harrington, England?
it was very good, and we had certain amount of time off, not too often, which allowed us to visit. We visited a friend of mine that was on the same crew, the engineer. He and I were pretty close. We went to Edinburgh, Scotland, and on one of our other leaves, 2 or 3 day pass, we went to what's the city that I mentioned? I'm getting a little confused. Um, what's the capital of England there? London. We went to London, and then from that's about the only 2 places that I remember that we went to.
So tell me about the unit you were with over in England. What was the day-to-day like there?
Well, the days were okay, but the nights we whenever we went on a mission, we would all attend the meeting that they had before giving us where the location was, and of course everything was at nighttime, and um, everything was secret. As I indicated before, we flew with the RAF in a way that we would take a smaller target, and the RAF would take a larger target, and we would get out maybe 20 minutes or so before the RAF, individually flying and with no lights. The airfield was very dimly lit where we were, and the planes had no lights on at all. And usually you had about 12 planes that would go on our missions, and with no escorts. And we come back with no lights either. So it'd be very hairy trying to find a way to land without bumping into one of your own people. So everybody had to really be alert.
And was that a normal mission?
It's a normal mission.
Was there any other special missions that your unit did?
Well, we flew with spies out of Dijon, France. Our, 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 our pilot was a very good pilot, not because I was on his crew, but because even the commanding officer, like anything that had to be done, they would choose our pilot and our crew to fly whatever they needed to be done. So they chose our crew to fly out of Dijon, France, and fly spy missions. Now, in a B-24, what they would do is take off the bottom turret so that all there is a hole there. And the spies would fly with us, and on occasion we would get to their destination where we were supposed to drop them off. And unfortunately, that it would be bombing by the RAF that we had no, and we still asked the spies if they wanted to jump, and they said no, so we'd take them back again. And they also had female spies that did what the male spies did. And the spies didn't come to our base until the last minute. They didn't want any and any of the spies getting too close to the men. They wanted, they're there, get right on the plane. So that's the way most of the spy missions were.
And then at this time, it was before or after the invasion of France?
This was after the invasion of France.
While you were over in England, how did you stay in touch with your family?
By letters and phone. That's it.
Can you tell me anything about the food that was...
I'm sorry?
The food while you were
The food?
in the service?
Being 18 years old, I didn't complain about the foods, no. And this, on some of our missions, on all of our missions, if we made it back, we would get a shot of liquor. Then we would be interviewed by the people to find out what our findings were, and that's it.
What was the supply like for your unit? Did you have enough supplies? Any shortages or anything like that?
No, not really. I don't recall any supply shortages. But there were times when a crew never came back again, and of course it would be daytime for us, and they would be taking the clothes off of the racks, and that kind of down.
So were there any, while you were doing these runs, were there any casualties from your unit?
Yes, there were. That's why some of the planes never came back. And also, the function that I had as a radio operator was that the 500-pound bombs that we would be dropping over at the site, if a bomb did not release by the bombardier, it was my duty to take off my parachute and walk on the catwalk and with a screwdriver release the 500-pound bomb and then tell the pilot, okay, let's go. And kind of hairy with the flak hitting your plane, and nice colors at nighttime, orange and red, and so.
So tell me about the experience of flying over occupied Europe.
I enjoyed it. I really did.
Any memorable experiences?
No, but one of our drops was a little bit, unfortunately, not very pleasant, and we just had to drop it and take off again. But and most of the times, we dropped the spies at 600 feet because they didn't want to swing too much when you dropped them. And dropping the supplies, we had to go 200 feet in order to drop the supplies properly. And the signals were all by flashlight or light that we had to make sure that we had the right target.
So for dropping the supplies, who were you dropping supplies to?
The French that are fighting the Germans in most areas, and parts of it were in parts of Germany, and most of it was in France.
How many missions of that did you go on? Do you recall?
No, I don't recall, but there were quite a few missions that we also dropped supplies in the upper part of Europe. We dropped supplies. I think most of the information I have is on that area that you might be interested in.
How did you handle the stress while you were, or did you even have any stress? Because you said you enjoyed flying over.
I really didn't.
No stress at all?
No. When you go with a target, and if the bomb didn't release, that's where my stress would be. But that was part of my job.
Was there anything you did for good luck? Any good luck charms that you brought with you? For as far as your off time when you weren't on these runs, what did you and your service mates do for entertainment? Or
Well, actually, we just hung around together. That's all. Unless we had a 3-day pass or a 2-day pass, then we would take off. But that's about the extent of it.
so how was the base at Harrington?
It wasn't a very large base, but I don't know how many planes we had. I think we had between 25 and 30 planes there. That's all. And but a lot of the time we spent at Dijon, France, flying the spies out, and we also flew material out of Dijon, France too.
Did you ever get any, besides the times that you went to the other cities of England, did you get any leave elsewhere? Or
Well, we had a good experience because our commanding officer had us fly a general to France. This is near the end of the war, and after we dropped the general in France, the guys asked the pilot to find something wrong with the plane so we could spend a little time in France. The war was still on at the time, and so we spent 3 days in Paris. And on the third day, the pilot says, "It'll be my ass if I don't call and get back again." So on the way back to our base in England, I was monitoring the radio, and lo and behold, the radio announcer said, "The war is over in Europe." So I got off my chair and I chewed the hell out of the pilot. We could have been in Paris on the war being over.
and tell me about the end of the war. What was your feelings on it?
Very happy because at that point in time I was corresponding with my wife of 70 years, and I was ready for our furlough. So on the 30-day furlough before we were going to fight with the Japanese, they loaded up our B-24 with 25 or 30 people that were going on the 30-day furlough. And we landed in Bradley Field in Hartford. And on my 30-day furlough, we got married. And during our honeymoon, God was with us. The war was over.
What did you feel, or how did you feel about the men that you served with, your officers and fellow enlisted?
They were all great. Really, really great. Now, we had 9 on our crew. And unfortunately, only 2 of us were left. The tail gunner and myself. And our pilot had his own plane, and he had a big business down Florida. He grew poinsettias for a living, and which is now being run by his son. And he had his own plane for ever since he got out of the service. And okay, I'm sorry. Ever since he got out of the service, he had his own plane, and passing all the examinations. Even at 93, he had his plane, and he passed away in 93. Just before he passed away, he had he had to make a landing, emergency landing, and in the paper, what they said that he had a crash, and this sort of ticked him off a little bit because he told the paper, he says, "I didn't crash, I landed my plane," And he said, "What are you doing what are you flying at 93 for?" He says, "I love flying. I passed my examinations. Why can't I fly?" So that's the attitude he had.
So you were in Connecticut when the war ended.
Yes.
Tell me about the end of the war here.
Well, at the end of the war, as I said before, at the end of the war in Germany, I mean, in Japan, we were on our honeymoon, so it couldn't have been a better day.
So after you came back from your honeymoon, did you went back to your unit and the war was over? How was
After the war, our crew was so close that the families of our crew got together. Maybe about 4 or 5 times. We all met at a certain place, different states, and except the bombardier. We could not get him to come with our crew, but the rest of the men all had meetings, and they brought their families and everything else. So it was really, we had a really close group.
and as far as your service at the end of the war, did they just say thank you for your service and
Well, at the end of the war, I was I had more time to spend. So actually they sent me back to South Dakota again to get discharged. So the war was over in 45, but I didn't get discharged until 46. That's about. And after the war, after my discharge, started to build a house, which is this house here, with my father-in-law. Took us 2 years to complete it because no wood was available, no nails were available, so it was very difficult. So it took us 2 years to complete this house. And this is where we've been ever since. And unfortunately, I lost my wife of 70 years. It will be 3 years this June 7th on my birthday that she'd be gone. That's my life.
so after your discharge in South Dakota, what was your homecoming back to Connecticut like?
Well, had to find a job. So other than that, well, I went to college in New Haven, and I took accounting up. It was a 2-year course, and that's what I did for about 30 years. Our daughter, unfortunately, at 42, she passed away. She had cancer for quite a few years, so I retired a little earlier than I wanted to.
How did your military experience influence your thinking about war and the military?
With this president that we have now, I'm glad I'm 92 because I can't see him being the president that we should have at this point in time. He's antagonizing everybody, not only people in the United States, but he's antagonizing our friends, our allies, all Europeans. I don't quite understand. So I can't see this world existing if he's going to pull all the spots.
Are you a member of any veterans organizations?
No, I was a member of the AMVETS for a while, but that's all.
You said you attended reunions with your old crew.
Yeah.
What were those like?
Well, we just got together for a few days, and our families were with us and everything. So it's just like a really good get together. That's all.
How did your time in the service affect how you lived the rest of your life?
I didn't see it. I really don't know because I don't know what it would have been if the war was not on.
So, what are your thoughts about the general, I guess, being of the military right now?
We have a good military group, but the thing of it is, I think what is happening is that he's trying to do too much for other people, instead of doing enough for what he was called to do as president. And I think there's something missing somewhere.
Do you care to comment on after you left the service? What were the VA? What was the VA like at that time?
I have no problems with the VA centers. I mean, they do an awful lot of write-ups in the paper about the VA not being what it should be and everything, but I go to Newington and I have no problems whatsoever, really. And West Haven is okay, but it's too big for me.
So tell me about this this write-up you did 2 years ago. What made you sit down and?
What was happening was that my wife of 70 years, she had the Alzheimer's, and while she was sick, I couldn't even think about something like this. I knew there were a lot of things that, but when she passed away, I had the time, which is, as I said before, 3 years. I was able to accumulate a lot of information from the men that were on the crew. And thank God I did, because, as I indicated before, there's only two out of 9 left. And as I was able to accumulate a lot of information, so I thought I'd write it down, not for myself, I wrote it down because I have great-grandchildren that probably will never know about World War II. And this is a good way of doing it, you know? And I kept all the information there in case they might be interested, you know. There's a box full of information there that's really, really interesting, but never known. That'll be up there. That'll be up to him.
Did you attend any medal ceremonies after you were?
No. But speaking of medal ceremonies, I had a lot of problems with the French consul in New York City. And I fought with them for about 4 months because they wouldn't give me the cross, the French medal for our group. And they said we didn't deserve it. So after 4 or 5 months, they finally conceded. And there's letters from Washington with the French consul, and when the cross came, that we got the cross.
After World War II, we had a few other conflicts that we were involved in. What were your feelings on those, like Korea and Vietnam?
Well, we had the Cold War too, you know. That was very interesting. A lot of people don't know about the Cold War, but that was really interesting. And I haven't really looked into the Korean War or the Vietnam War. I figured I had enough.
What about the current conflicts that we're involved in?
Yeah, that's
as far as your military experience, how those are going.
I think more should have been done with Iraq, but that's just my opinion. They didn't want to lose any more men, and what I think happened was that when we were in Iraq for such a long time, the people that live in Iraq and were born in Iraq did not do their share to bring it to where it should have been, and that's why our men had to die because of their incompetence.
Is there anything else that I haven't covered that you'd like to interject with? Any memorable experiences while you were in the service or anything like that, or anything after?
No, not really. Well, there's one experience that I don't know whether I told you this, that when I went on a furlough with my buddy to London, uh, we were at a hotel, and this was still, the war was on, and we heard the bomb go off. But well, actually, we heard this noise, but we didn't know what it was. So when we got up in the morning, well, maybe about 4 or 5 blocks away, one of the parks, there was a V2 bomb that had not exploded, that landed. So if that V2 was armed, we wouldn't be here today.
I'd like to thank you for your service and for taking the time to be interviewed today.
Thank you. You're very patient.